Right before our flight, my partner admitted a secret that ruined everything. Airports have a way of magnifying whatever mood you're already in. If you're excited, the buzz of rolling suitcases and intercom announcements feels like part of the adventure. If you're anxious, every line, every TSA shuffle, every delay feels like torture. For me that morning, it was somewhere in between. Jittery excitement mixed with the familiar stress of trying to herd my life into a carry-on. My partner Ashley and I were flying out of Denver International to Boston for her cousin's wedding. It wasn't our first trip together. We'd done plenty of long weekends and family visits, but it felt like a milestone. A week on the East Coast, a formal event, meeting some extended family I'd only heard about. Ashley had been buzzing about it for weeks, shopping for the perfect dress, nagging me about shaving my patchy beard, reminding me over and over not to forget the gift. On paper, it was supposed to be fun. A mini vacation, time away from work and routine, a chance to play perfect couple in front of her relatives. But if I'm being honest, things had felt off for a while. Nothing dramatic, just small cracks. Her constant late nights at work. The way she angled her phone away when texts came in. The sudden habit of taking calls in another room. Whenever I asked, she'd wave it off. Just clients. Just stress. Just tired. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. Mostly. The night before, we'd argued about the suitcase. Classic travel fight. She wanted to check a bag. I didn't. She insisted she needed 3 pairs of heels for one wedding. I pointed out we were flying budget and baggage fees were highway robbery. She snapped that I was cheap. I snapped back that she was high maintenance. We went to bed without speaking. In the morning, the fight had dissolved into the usual pre-travel panic. Zipping zippers, checking passports, making sure the boarding passes were downloaded. We shared coffee in silence. Our words clipped but polite, like co-workers more than partners. Looking back now, I realize she was probably carrying the weight of her secret, rehearsing how she was going to drop it. And me? I was just worried about whether TSA would confiscate my travel-size shaving cream. The Uber driver was a talker, the kind who wants to know your whole life story before you hit the terminal. So, you two heading out for vacation? Business? Wedding? Ashley smiled and answered for us. Wedding. Family thing. Should be fun. I watched her face in the rearview mirror. Perfect smile, casual tone. You'd never guess she was sitting on a bomb. I mumbled something about hoping the flight wasn't delayed. The driver launched into a rant about airline prices. Ashley leaned against the window, scrolling her phone, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I remember thinking, she looks a million miles away already. If you've ever flown out of Denver, you know the madness. Lines snaking through security, people sprinting with neck pillows bouncing, kids crying, TSA barking orders like drill sergeants. Ashley and I got in line, shuffling forward inch by inch. She was unusually quiet. Normally she'd be complaining about slow people, mocking the shoes off, laptops out routine. Instead, she just stared at the floor, chewing her lip. I thought it was nerves about flying. She always claimed she hated turbulence. So I leaned over, kissed her temple and said, "It'll be fine. We'll be drinking champagne at the wedding in no time." She smiled weakly, but it didn't reach her eyes. By the time we made it through security and found our gate, I was sweating. Not from nerves, but from the chaos of stripping belts, juggling electronics, and putting shoes back on while some guy behind you sighs like you're single-handedly delaying the flight. Ashley sat down, clutching her boarding pass like it might float away. She stared at it for a long time, then at me, then back at the boarding pass. That's when I felt it. That tiny gut feeling, like the universe holding its breath before something shatters. I didn't know it yet, but we weren't just boarding a plane. We were boarding the end of our relationship. The thing about airports is that everyone is in their own bubble of stress. The family juggling strollers, the business guy barking into his AirPods, the college kids in matching sweatshirts. Everyone's orbiting their own little crisis. Which means, when your life is about to fall apart, nobody notices. You're just another tired couple at gate C37, waiting for a delayed flight. Ashley and I sat shoulder to shoulder but miles apart. She kept fiddling with her boarding pass, smoothing the edges, folding and unfolding it. I scrolled mindlessly through ESPN on my phone, pretending to care about trade rumors, trying to ignore the tension radiating off her. Finally, she cleared her throat. "We need to talk." Those 4 words, the airport equivalent of a bomb squad announcement. I turned to her, expecting maybe another fight about luggage, or some snippy remark about how I'd forgotten to pack snacks. But her face was pale, eyes darting like she was about to step in front of a firing squad. "What's wrong?" I asked. She took a breath. "I need to tell you something before we get on this plane." My stomach tightened. Not the gallstone kind of pain, not food poisoning. The kind that tells you instinctively, this is bad. Ashley's voice dropped to almost a whisper, like she was afraid the woman with the neck pillow 2 seats away might overhear. "I've been seeing someone else." There it was, plain, brutal, unadorned. The sentence that split my life into before and after. I blinked at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a terrible joke. But she just stared at me, eyes glistening, lips trembling. "How long?" I managed to croak. She didn't flinch. "Almost a year." Around us, the intercom cheerfully announced boarding for Group 1. Kids squealed. A man laughed loudly into his phone. Life kept moving. No one cared that my relationship had just detonated in a row of plastic chairs at gate C37. I sat there in shock, the words echoing in my skull. Almost a year. A year of dinners, of Netflix nights, of inside jokes. All while she was living a double script. My hands shook. My boarding pass slipped to the floor. "Why now?" I finally asked. My voice sounded alien to me, thin, cracking. She swallowed hard. "Because I couldn't get on that plane and pretend anymore. Not in front of my family, not at a wedding. I had to tell you." Every instinct screamed to yell, to demand names, dates, details, to throw the coffee I was holding at the wall. But the absurdity of where we were froze me. I couldn't have a meltdown at gate C37. I couldn't be that guy, screaming in an airport, surrounded by TSA and screaming toddlers. So I just sat there, shaking, whispering, "Who?" She hesitated. "Someone from work." That was worse. It meant proximity. It meant lies layered into daily life. It meant every late showing, every client dinner was possibly him. And then, as if on cue, the intercom crackled. "Now boarding Group 3. Passengers seated in rows 20 through 30 may begin boarding." That was us. Ashley looked at me, waiting for me to move, to stand up and follow her down the jet bridge like we were still a couple. I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my chest like a cinder block. The thought of sitting next to her for 4 hours, trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 feet, made me want to vomit. But here's the thing, our bags were already checked. My clothes, my laptop, everything I needed for a week was in the belly of that plane. And her entire family waiting for us in Boston still thought we were the happy couple. I stood up slowly, like a man walking to his execution, and followed her onto the plane. As we shuffled down the aisle, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. Because in that moment I realized, airports don't just move people across the country. Sometimes they move you straight out of your own life. I've flown enough to know the usual annoyances, crying babies, seat kickers, the guy who insists on hogging the armrest. But nothing compares to sitting beside the person who just detonated your relationship, buckled in together for 4.5 hours with no escape. Ashley and I shuffled onto the plane in silence, the kind of silence that isn't calm but electric, buzzing with tension. I could feel the stares of strangers, not because they knew what happened, but because I was visibly unraveling. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. My eyes burned, my hands shook. To them, I probably just looked like another anxious flyer. But really, I was a man strapped into a pressurized hell. We found our seats, middle and window. Of course she'd taken the window when we booked. She always wanted control of the shade, wanted to gaze out at clouds and pretend flying was romantic. I slumped into the middle, boxed in by a stranger on the aisle who smelled like beef jerky. Ashley pressed herself against the window, face turned away, as though the runway lights were the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. I sat rigid, arms crossed, staring at the laminated safety card like it might teach me how to eject myself into a new life. As the engines roared and the plane hurtled skyward, I gripped the armrests, not out of fear of flying, but fear of myself. Fear that I'd snap, that I'd whisper something venomous too loud, that I'd cause a scene. Ashley glanced at me once, her lips parting like she wanted to speak, then thought better of it. She turned back to the window. Her reflection in the glass looked pale, haunted. I wondered if she was already regretting telling me, or regretting that she hadn't told me sooner. Airplanes are weirdly intimate. You're inches apart, breathing the same recycled air, but we might as well have been on different planets. She scrolled her phone with frantic energy. I stared at the seatback screen, flipping channels without watching. The stranger on my other side dozed off, head lolling dangerously close to my shoulder. Babies cried somewhere in the back. Flight attendants clinked carts down the aisle, offering pretzels like peace offerings to the damned. And through it all, the silence between us grew heavier. It was like sitting in a coffin with her, buried alive in betrayal. About 2 hours in, the plane hit turbulence. The kind that rattles your teeth and makes overhead bins groan. People gasped, clutched armrests. The seatbelt light dinged on. Instinctively, Ashley reached for my hand. Muscle memory, years of flying together, her always grabbing me when things got bumpy. But this time, I pulled away. Her face crumpled. She turned back to the window, blinking fast. It should have felt satisfying, denying her that comfort. Instead, it made my chest ache. Because once, that was us. Partners in every storm, literal or metaphorical. Now, just two strangers sharing air. When the drink cart finally rattled past, I ordered whiskey. Neat. I don't usually drink on planes, but I needed the burn, something sharp to drown out the numbness. Ashley asked for ginger ale, her voice cracking. She waited until the flight attendant moved on, then whispered, "I didn't want you to find out like this." I laughed bitterly under my breath, drawing a curious look from beef jerky guy. "No, because the gate at DIA was the perfect time." Her eyes filled with tears. I couldn't lie to my family anymore. They all think we're perfect. They all expect us to... She trailed off. I didn't want to hear the end of that sentence. To marry, to have kids, to keep playing house while she lived a second script. I turned away, downed my whiskey, and let the silence swallow us again. By the time the captain announced our descent, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. My body was stiff, my throat raw, my soul hollow. Ashley looked wrecked too. Makeup smeared, eyes red, lips chewed raw. As the wheels screeched onto the runway, reality hit me like a punch. We weren't just landing in Boston. We were landing in front of her entire family, who still thought we were the happy couple arriving for a wedding weekend. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the tarmac, to vanish before the charade continued. But instead, I sat there, buckled in, while the plane taxied to the gate, trapped in the wreckage of what used to be my life. Because as much as I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear, there was no hole big enough to hide from what came next. Meeting Ashley's family. There's something surreal about baggage claim. That carousel clanking to life, strangers shoulder to shoulder, everyone craning for a glimpse of their Samsonite. Usually, it's tedious. This time, it was torture. Ashley and I stood stiffly side by side, not speaking. The weight of her confession pressed between us like another piece of luggage we couldn't check. She glanced at me once, whispering, "Please, don't say anything. Not yet." My laugh came out bitter, sharp. Right, wouldn't want to ruin the wedding. Her eyes filled, but she said nothing. She just gripped her phone tighter like it might anchor her. My duffel finally emerged, sliding onto the carousel like it had no idea it carried the remnants of a relationship inside. I grabbed it and marched toward the exit, Ashley trailing behind. Waiting just beyond the sliding doors was a cluster of her family. Parents, cousins, siblings, all grinning and waving like they were welcoming royalty. They rushed forward, hugging Ashley, clapping me on the back, chattering about the weekend. To them, we were still the couple, still the picture of stability. I plastered on a smile so fake my cheeks hurt. Her mom hugged me tight. "So glad you're here. Ashley's been talking about this for weeks." I almost laughed, talking about it while sneaking around with someone else. Her dad clapped me on the shoulder. "You ready for the chaos? Weddings in this family are never quiet." "Buddy, you have no idea," I thought. They piled us into a minivan like sardines, luggage wedged in, everyone talking over each other. Ashley squeezed into the seat beside me, her thigh pressed against mine, as if proximity might erase the truth she'd dropped at DIA. Her cousin up front asked if we were excited for the trip. Ashley chirped, "Of course," like nothing had happened. I stared out the window, jaw locked, tasting blood where I bit my tongue to keep from blurting the truth. We pulled up to her parents' house, big, sprawling, full of people. Laughter and the smell of pasta sauce spilled out the door. Inside, more hugs, more handshakes, more introductions. Cousins I'd never met shook my hand. Aunts pressed kisses to my cheek. Everyone wanted to know how we were doing. I kept lying. "Good, busy with work, excited to be here." Each word felt like poison. Ashley floated through the room like nothing had happened. She laughed, she hugged, she helped her mom in the kitchen. Watching her, I wondered how many times she'd worn that mask with me, Dinner that night was long, loud, and chaotic. Everyone crammed around a table, wine flowing, voices overlapping. Ashley sat beside me, acting the part of the perfect girlfriend, pouring me wine, laughing at jokes. But I was crumbling. Every time she touched my arm, I flinched. Every time someone said, "You too?" my stomach turned. Her brother noticed. At one point he leaned over and asked quietly, "You okay, man? You look pale." I forced a smile. Just tired from the flight. But the truth was boiling. Later, after dessert, her aunt raised a glass. "To Ashley and my name. Such a great couple. Can't wait to dance with you two at the wedding." Everyone clapped, cheered, lifted glasses. I stared at Ashley. She stared back, eyes wide, silently begging me not to say anything. And I didn't. Not then. I raised my glass and drank, swallowing the bitterness like poison. But something cracked in me, because I realized she wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to all of them. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could carry the weight of her secret. That night, lying in the guest room bed beside her, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked. Voices murmured in other rooms, but all I could hear was her whisper at DIA. "I've been seeing someone else." I lay stiff, eyes on the ceiling, while she curled away from me, silent. And I knew. This trip was only just beginning. And the worst was yet to come. If arriving in Boston was walking into a minefield, the rehearsal dinner was stepping right onto one. By then, the secret Ashley dropped at DIA was eating me alive. 2 nights of fake smiles, clinking glasses, pretending to be the happy boyfriend. It was like holding my breath underwater while everyone else laughed on the shore. The day of the rehearsal dinner, Ashley was all nerves and charm. She helped her cousin with centerpieces, joked with the groomsmen, and played maid of honor adjacent like she was auditioning for sainthood. I tagged along, silent, trying not to let the mask slip. Every time someone snapped a photo of us together, her arm looped through mine. I wanted to scream, "She's lying!" This whole thing is a lie. But I didn't. Not yet. The dinner was in some rustic event space. String lights, long wooden tables, mason jars with flowers. The kind of Instagram-ready backdrop that screams perfect wedding weekend. Everyone was glowing. The bride and groom basked in attention. Parents beamed. Cousins buzzed with excitement. And me? I sat there with a smile stretched so tight it felt like my skin might split. Ashley sat beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine like we were still a team. Each touch felt like acid. Halfway through, the toasts began. Cute, sweet, predictable. The maid of honor talking about childhood memories. The best man cracking jokes about the groom's college years. People laughed, cried, clapped. Then Ashley's uncle stood up, glass raised, cheeks already flushed from too much wine. "And here's to Ashley and my name. Next in line, am I right?" The room erupted in cheers, whistles, claps. Everyone turned toward us. Ashley laughed nervously, waving them off. I just sat there, frozen, the blood draining from my face. Ashley leaned toward me, whispering, "Please, just smile. Just go with it." And that was the spark. That was the match on gasoline. Because how dare she? How dare she demand another smile, another lie, when she'd already burned a year of my life behind my back? I stood. I don't even remember deciding to. One moment I was sitting there, pretending. The next, I was on my feet, glass in hand, voice loud enough to cut through the laughter. "Actually," I said, my voice shaking, "I don't think Ashley and I will be next in line for anything." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to us. Ashley's smile froze, her hand clutching the tablecloth. I went on. "Because Ashley's been seeing someone else for almost a year." The words landed like a bomb. Gasps, forks clattering onto plates, a cousin muttering, "What the hell?" under his breath. Ashley's face crumpled. "Stop," she hissed, but it was too late. The truth was out, raw and bleeding. Her mother's jaw dropped. "Ashley, is that true?" Ashley stammered, eyes darting. But silence was as good as confession. Her dad slammed his napkin onto the table, muttering something about disgraceful. The bride and groom looked horrified, their rehearsal dinner hijacked by scandal. Ashley burst into tears, bolting from the table. Chairs scraped, voices rose. The room dissolved into chaos. And me? I just stood there shaking, heart pounding, watching the facade shatter in front of 50 people. Later, back at her parents' house, the shouting match began. Ashley begged me to say I'd exaggerated, to say I was confused. Her mom accused me of ruining the weekend. Her dad didn't say much, just shook his head at his daughter with disappointment carved deep in his face. I packed my bag right then. "I'm done," I told her, voice flat. "You ended us a year ago. I just caught up." I slept in the guest room that night, door locked, phone buzzing with messages I didn't answer. Somewhere down the hall, Ashley sobbed into a pillow. Somewhere else, her parents argued in hushed tones. The house that had felt so warm and welcoming days before now felt like a crime scene. And the wedding hadn't even happened yet. By the time the sun rose on the actual wedding day, the damage was already done. Ashley's confession at the airport had cracked everything wide open. My outburst at the rehearsal dinner had dragged the truth into the open. Now we were all just staggering through the wreckage, pretending a wedding could go on like normal. The house was tense, buzzing with forced normalcy. Her mom slammed pots around in the kitchen. Her dad retreated into silence, and Ashley barely emerged from her room. When she did, her eyes were swollen, makeup half smeared, voice hoarse from crying. I avoided her completely. I sipped burnt coffee at the kitchen counter, scrolling through my phone as though the headlines about sports trades mattered more than the implosion of my life. Nobody spoke to me directly. Conversations swirled around me, careful not to touch me. I was radioactive, the unwelcome reminder of what Ashley had done. The ceremony itself took place at some picturesque church outside the city. White steeple, stained glass glowing in the sun, pews filled with smiling relatives. From the outside, it looked perfect. On the inside, I was a ghost in a suit. I sat 2 rows back, watching the bride glide down the aisle, the groom choking back tears. Everyone sighed and dabbed their eyes. It was supposed to be romantic, a celebration of love and new beginnings. But all I could think was how fake it all felt. How easily people can plaster smiles over lies. How Ashley had probably looked at me with the same adoration, the same fake glow, even as she was sneaking around. Ashley sat beside me rigid, her hand twitching like she wanted to reach for mine. I pulled away, folding my arms. She swallowed hard, staring straight ahead. The reception was held in a banquet hall strung with fairy lights, tables groaning with food and champagne. Music blasted, people danced, laughter filled the room. It was a bubble of celebration that I floated outside of, like pressing my face to the glass of a world I no longer belonged to. At first, I kept to myself. I nursed a drink, ate almost nothing, watched the dance floor swirl. Ashley tried to mingle, tried to plaster her charm back on, but the whispers followed her like shadows. Relatives who'd been at the rehearsal dinner whispered to those who hadn't. You could feel the shift in the air, eyes cutting toward her. Toward me, then quickly away. It was during the toasts, always the damn toasts, that everything exploded again. The bride's father gave his sentimental speech. The maid of honor cried her way through hers. Then Ashley's cousin, already drunk, grabbed the mic. "To Ashley and my name," he slurred. "Best couple here, right? Maybe next wedding we'll all be back for you two, huh?" The crowd gave an awkward cheer. Some clapped, some didn't. All eyes flicked to us, and I snapped. I stood, my voice louder than I meant. "Stop saying that. There won't be a next wedding for us. Not ever." The music screeched to a halt. Conversations died mid-sentence. The mic feedback hummed. Ashley's face went white. "Please," she whispered, but too late. I went on, louder this time. "She's been cheating on me for almost a year, and everyone keeps pretending we're perfect. We're not. We're done." Gasps rippled through the room. Chairs scraped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Ashley burst into tears, bolting from the table. Her mother followed, shouting her name. The bride looked furious, the groom confused. Guests whispered like wildfire, some glaring at me, some glaring at Ashley. The wedding, for all intents and purposes, derailed. I left before dessert, walked out into the cold night air, jacket slung over my shoulder, phone buzzing with texts I ignored. Ashley caught up with me in the parking lot, mascara streaked, eyes desperate. "Why are you doing this?" she begged. I stopped, turned, stared at her like she was a stranger. "Because you already did. You killed us a year ago. I'm just burying the body." And with that, I walked away. I checked into a cheap hotel near the airport. The kind with humming vending machines in the hallway and carpets that smelled faintly of bleach. I lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day on loop. Ashley texted me non-stop. Her mom called twice. I ignored them all. Because at that point, the decision was made. There was no saving us. By the time I flew back to Denver, I felt hollowed out, like someone had scraped me clean and left only a shell. Weddings are supposed to be about beginnings, but for me, That weekend was all about endings. The ending of trust, of partnership, of a version of myself I thought was permanent. Flying back alone was surreal. I'd switched my ticket to leave the morning after the wedding, using points I didn't really have to burn. I couldn't stomach one more day under Ashley's parents' roof, couldn't endure the side eyes from her cousins or the forced small talk at brunch. On the flight, I stared out the window the whole time. No TV, no book, just clouds. The same setting where Ashley had dropped her bomb at DIA, except now I was free of her. It should have felt like relief, but mostly it just felt like grief. When I got home, our apartment felt like a crime scene. Everything was where I'd left it, but the air was different, stale, heavy, wrong. Her shoes by the door, her jacket on the hook, her half-used bottle of shampoo in the shower. Each item screamed liar. I didn't wait. I packed my essentials, clothes, laptop, toiletries, and moved into a short-term rental. A bland, furnished studio with beige walls and generic art, but it was mine. No ghosts, no lies. Just me and 4 walls of silence. The fallout with friends was brutal. Some reached out immediately, furious on my behalf, swearing they'd never speak to Ashley again. Others stayed neutral, awkwardly inviting us both to group hangouts, like we could just sit on opposite sides of the table and pretend. One couple, our closest double-date friends, shocked me the most. They took Ashley's side, claimed I humiliated her publicly, and should have handled things privately. I wanted to scream, "She humiliated me every night for a year." But instead, I just stopped answering their texts. Because if you can't see the difference between betrayal and reaction, you're not my friend. Ashley tried to spin it. She showed up at the rental one night, mascara streaked, voice cracking. "We can fix this. We can try therapy. It doesn't have to end like this." I stared at her, really stared. And I realized I didn't even know who I was looking at anymore. "You didn't just cheat," I told her. "You built an entire life out of lies. You lied to me. You lied to him. You lied to your family. And then you asked me to lie too. I'm done living in your fiction." She cried harder, begged, even offered to quit her job, cut ties, start fresh. But it was too late. Trust isn't a light switch you can just flick back on. It's glass. And once it's shattered, you can glue the pieces together, but it'll never be whole again. We weren't married legally, though we'd talked about it for years, which made things simpler. No divorce lawyers, no alimony, no custody battles. But untangling 10 years of shared life still felt like surgery without anesthesia. We divided furniture, electronics, even our stupid collection of board games. Every item was a tiny argument, a reminder of what we once built. When it was over, the apartment was bare. She moved out first. I followed, leaving the landlord with 2 months' notice and a hollowed-out unit that smelled faintly of our shared past. For weeks, I lived in silence. No Ashley, no arguments, no forced smiles. Just me, my laptop, frozen dinners, and Otis, the dog who didn't care who cheated as long as he still got belly rubs. The silence was brutal at first. Every creak of the rental felt like loneliness pressing in. But slowly, the silence became peace. No more lies, no more pretending. Just raw truth, however painful. People think the worst part of betrayal is the moment you find out. And yeah, that moment shatters you. But what nobody tells you is that the real hardest part is the long gray stretch that comes afterward. The weeks and months where you're left staring at the ruins, trying to figure out how to build a life again. The rental became my cocoon. Small, sterile, and temporary. But it was where I began to stitch myself back together. Every morning I woke up alone. At first, that felt like punishment. 10 years of waking up next to Ashley. Her hair sprawled across the pillow, her soft murmur when the alarm went off. Gone. Now it was just me and silence. But eventually, I realized the quiet was freedom. No lies brewing in the corner, no fake smiles to maintain. Just me, my coffee, and the slow drip of healing. I did the cliché thing. I went to therapy. At first I hated it, sitting across from a stranger, retelling the same story, feeling like I was just opening the wound again and again. But over time, the therapist helped me see patterns. How I'd ignored red flags for years because I wanted so badly to believe in the image of us. How I'd bent myself into knots to keep peace, to avoid conflict, to hold on to something that was already crumbling. It was brutal work, but it gave me clarity. The betrayal wasn't my fault, but the blindness, the denial, the willingness to believe lies, that was on me. and I promised myself I'd never hand over that much of my trust without boundaries again. Dan, my best friend, became my lifeline. Every Friday, without fail, he'd show up with whiskey and takeout. Sometimes we talked about Ashley. Sometimes we just sat in silence watching sports. Sometimes we laughed about dumb YouTube videos until 2 a.m. Other friends checked in too. The ones who stayed loyal reminded me I wasn't unlovable, even if Ashley had treated me like I was disposable. My parents were steady. My mom called constantly, asking if I'd eaten, sending me care packages with cookies and frozen casseroles. My dad stopped by unannounced, fixing little things in the rental, refusing to let me pay for groceries when we went shopping together. They didn't say much about Ashley, but I could see it in their faces. The mix of disappointment, anger, and protectiveness. They had trusted her too, loved her like a daughter. Her betrayal rippled outward, hurting them almost as much as it hurt me. Rachel, the other woman, faded from my life but never completely disappeared. Once I saw her at the grocery store. We locked eyes across the frozen foods aisle. She looked tired, older, like the weight of Ashley's lies had crushed her too. She gave me a sad smile. I nodded back. That was it. Two people connected by the same disaster, strangers bound by betrayal. The strangest part of rebuilding wasn't the grief, it was the freedom. I started trying things Ashley had always rolled her eyes at. I joined a trivia team at a local bar. I picked up running, gasping through 2 miles until I learned to love the burn. I even took a solo weekend trip to Santa Fe, wandering art galleries and eating alone in restaurants. Things I'd never done because Ashley had always dictated our plans. Piece by piece, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding. I was rediscovering. I was more than the other half of a couple. I was me. Months later, I dipped my toes into dating again. A coworker set me up with her friend. We grabbed coffee on a Saturday morning. She was kind, funny, and completely uninterested in talking about Ashley. It didn't go anywhere romantically, but it reminded me that life didn't end with her. That connection was still possible. That I wasn't doomed to orbit the ghost of my failed relationship forever. The real turning point came one morning when I woke up and realized something simple. I hadn't thought about Ashley the day before. Not once. Not her face. Not her betrayal. Not the wedding disaster, or the airport, or the plane ride from hell. For the first time in over a year, she hadn't haunted me. And that's when I knew I was healing. It's been just over a year since that day at Denver International, sitting at gate C-37, when Ashley dropped the words that detonated my life. I've been seeing someone else. I can still picture the exact shade of the carpet beneath my feet. The sound of the intercom announcing boarding groups. The smell of burnt coffee from the kiosk nearby. It's funny how trauma locks the smallest details into your memory, like bookmarks in a chapter you never wanted to reread. The airport has become a metaphor in my head. A place where people depart, where lives change direction, where everything is about movement. And that's exactly what happened to me. That day, Ashley thought she was just telling me a secret before a flight. But what she really did was set me on a different path altogether. I walked into DIA thinking I was boarding a plane for a wedding. I walked out of Boston knowing I was walking out of a 10-year relationship. The strangest part of life now is how normal it feels without her. For months after, I couldn't imagine a day that wasn't haunted by her voice, her smell, her lies. But now, she's a ghost I rarely see. Sure, every now and then she flickers back. A mutual friend mentions her. A song she loved pops up on the radio. I catch myself wondering where she is, who she's with. But it's fleeting. Most days, she's just gone. Here's what betrayal taught me, the hard way. 1. Silence is a lie too. Every time I ignored the red flags, every time I swallowed my suspicions, I was lying to myself. Silence let her lies thrive. 2. Love isn't blind, it's willfully blind. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was off. I just didn't want it to be true. And so I let her build her double life in plain sight. 3. The truth always leaks. Whether it's through a stray text, a nervous glance, or a confession at an airport gate, lies can't hold forever. 4. Freedom feels like grief at first. The end of us felt like losing a limb. But slowly I realized I could walk without her, run without her, live without her. A year later, my life is smaller in some ways, bigger in others. I live in a modest apartment, not the one we shared, but one filled only with things that are mine. I cook for myself, badly, but nobody complains. I run a few times a week, slow but steady, proving to myself that I can keep moving forward. I see my friends more. I answer their texts. I let people back in. And yes, I've dated. Nothing serious yet, but enough to remind me that not everyone lies. That not everyone will gut me at an airport. From what I hear through the grapevine, Ashley's life didn't get easier after me. The guy she'd been seeing? That ended not long after the wedding fiasco. Too much fallout, too much mess. She tried to patch things up with her family, but trust once shattered is hard to rebuild. Her reputation took a hit too. Apparently the story of the rehearsal dinner spread farther than she thought. I don't revel in her downfall. I don't wish her pain. But I also don't pity her. She made choices, and those choices burned everything down. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the irony. That it all came out in an airport. A place built on departures, arrivals, and in-betweens. A place where everyone's going somewhere but nobody lingers. She thought we were boarding a plane together. But really, she was just boarding a different life. One without me in it. And me? I thought I was traveling for a wedding. Turns out I was traveling to the funeral of my relationship. I don't hate Ashley. Hate is too heavy to carry. I don't love her either. What I feel now is something quieter. A kind of distant sadness. Like looking at an old photograph of someone who no longer exists. I survived. I rebuilt. I found pieces of myself I didn't know I'd lost. And if I learned anything, it's this. The worst truths often arrive at the worst times. But sometimes being blindsided is the only way to finally see clearly.